Hello again. So today I'm going to be extending a patio. Exactly the same process as if you were building a new one, only smaller. So what I'm going to do, essentially these walls here, I'm going to need to extend those, because what I want to do is put two more slabs in, one there and one there. So I'm going to have to extend the wall. There's a wall down here, extend that wall, put a new corner in, and then put some slabs on top. So let's get started. So now you can see that I'm going to have to build walls onto what was a flower bed. So I'm going to have to dig some footings where the walls need to be. Now note that the walls need to be just inside the slabs and not level with them, so they've got some way of the water running off. So all we're going to do, dig some trenches in the right places. Now obviously if you're going to do this for a much bigger patio, then you're going to need to mark it out with string, so that you know where to dig the trenches. You don't want them to be all weebly wobbly, but let's get started on that. So now however you choose to mark it out, you need to be fairly accurate, but you don't want it being all over the place. If you're putting in a new one, then obviously you need to measure the size of your slabs, and don't forget to allow a little bit for the grouting when you're marking out where the walls are going to be. That can be quite an interesting one to do. All I've done, because I'm putting a corner in here, I've just measured out from the walls on both sides and put a stake in the ground where the corner of the wall is going to be. So that is going to be my starting point. So here's the peg in place, and that marks where the corner of the wall is. So what I need to do is dig footings around that. Now the footings need to be about 300mm deep, which is about the size of this ruler, and also just a little bit wider. So clearly they're going to be something like that from the peg, a little bit wider, and the same going in that direction. So just dig a trench and that will go right round this peg. So I'm going to start off by just marking with the spade, and then once I know where it is, just start digging. Now, as you dig the hole, you can be checking with the level just to make sure that you're getting the bottom level, so that you're not all over the place. Okay, so I've been digging for a little while now. You can see I've dug the trench, but in this case the wall is actually, or the ground is actually sloping away. So what I'm going to need to do is put a step in the bricks. So you can see here that I've actually gone level, and I've put a step here in the footings so that we can step the bricks down. And I've measured that against where the bricks come on this side, so that I know I've got the step in the right place, so I'm not trying to step the bricks down halfway through a brick. Next thing is to prepare it for the concrete. First things first is to get the level. So I'm going to go to the same level as the footings for the original wall. What I'm going to do, bang in a wooden stake right in the middle, and then using my level I'm going to bang it in until it's the right level. So now at this end of the step I'm going to do exactly the same thing. If I can find my helmet. So bang it in, make sure, using my level, that it's the same as the others. It's got to go a little bit further yet. And now that I've done that, I've got a bit of shuttering here that basically is a piece of fence panelling. I'm going to bang that into the ground to stop the concrete from flowing back, so I get that step. So when I take this out, the concrete will be dry, there'll be a step. So I'm just going to bang this in, and that should hold it solid while I pour the concrete in. So now the concrete mix that I'm going to use: 1 part cement, 2 parts sand, 4 parts ballast. Now you can buy the ballast stuff mixed with sand already, so in that case that's what I've got some left over here from another job. So that means 6 parts of the sand and ballast mix and 1 part of cement. So I'm going to mix it here in this. So there we are, there's 6 spoonfuls of the ballast and sand, and then we'll stick in 1 of cement, so it's just going to a couple of these, so I can't get a full spoonful. Probably a touch more. Okay, and the first thing we're going to do is just mix it dry. Why? Because it's easy. Until I get a nice sort of grey consistency to it. And you can see by standing at the back of the wheelbarrow I can control it quite nicely. It's not going everywhere and the wheelbarrow is fairly stable. Okay, now I've got mixed it, I can add some water. Beware not to add too much or it will turn into a slurry. And there we are, that's what I'm looking for. It's not too wet, but it is noticeably wet, so I can pour it in and then I can get a reasonably good level on it. And here we are back at the hole, so all I'm going to do is chip it in. So by my reckon I'm going to need about maybe 6 of those, and then just to make sure it's in, just kind of flatten it out. I'll go and get some more. Okay, so once most of it's in, and take a flat stick and you can start tamping it down. Just sort of knocks the extra air out of it and just gets the level. So in this case, and then at this end, so I'm looking for those sticks that I put in earlier so I can keep dropping the level down until I find those, until I find, there it is, there's the stick, so I know I've got that level. Doesn't have to be perfect. You don't want to do this too much because it'll bring the water to the surface as well, which is not good. And then we just carry on and do the rest. And here we are, that's that bit done. So you can see it's level with the foundations of the wall there, and then there's a step that's level with where the bricks are, and then it joins and is the same level here. And obviously I put the stakes in so that the bits in between would all be at the same level, and I can test that with a spirit level just to make sure, but that's done. And all I need to do now is wait for that to dry. Usually overnight's enough and we can get started on the wall. Now finding things that match is always really difficult. If you're extending a patio, trying to find slabs that are the same is quite difficult. All I can recommend is that you try the local providers, local places like builders, merchants, and maybe a local place that makes slabs. Try those, because the chances are if someone else has built the patio fairly recently, then those are the kind of places they will have gone to fetch the stuff. Measure exactly and take pictures, take them to the local places, see what they've got. Otherwise you're going to have to find something that's as close as possible, which is never very easy. What you could do is put very different colours in to try and make a feature of it, to try and make it look like you were supposed to do that. But anyway, that's my halfpence worth. Okay, so now that the concrete is dry, I've taken the wood out, the bit that was across here. Now the pegs I tend to leave in, they're just tiny little things, and what will happen is they'll rot down and you'll get a hole through the foundation, and for me that's easier than bothering to pull the peg out. You can pull the peg out if you want to, or if you're using big pegs you probably do want to, but little pegs I tend to leave them in, probably too lazy. Anyway, next step, take the bricks that you're going to use, and I'm just laying them out here just to get dry, just to get a feel for how many bricks are going to fit in, where I'm going to have to cut them, that kind of thing. And these seem to fit reasonably well. I think I'll have to cut a little bit off this one. And this is where you need to be quite accurate. Never try and build a straight wall by eye, because you'll end up building a dog's leg. Okay, so the next thing to do is to mark it out. So I'm using this string. It's kind of builder string. It comes on like a spike, so you can stick it in the ground. Unfortunately, because this is old brickwork, I can't stick it into the old brickwork. So what I like to do, I can put it down here and use a bit of gaffer tape, and I gaffer tape it onto the brick. So I'm gaffer taping it onto the brick at the level that I want the brick to be at. So if I take a bit of this tape, and then I can line up. Can you see that? Let me bring it a bit closer. Okay, so I'll just line it up with the brick and then just put my tape across like that, and then I've got tape that lines up with the top of the brick, and I can then unroll it to the other end and stick it in the ground at the right distance, and there we are. It's coming around to the other side now. I've put in the string spike in here. I've measured the distance exactly from the wall. I need to know, and based on the other wall, I need to know this needs to be 120 centimeters from here, which it is. So I've used this brick just to mark it so that I know where it is. I've stuck this in the ground, and then it's a case of getting your spirit level, and I find it easier to put it under the string and just adjusting that until you get the bubble in the middle. So I know that that string line is now the correct distance from there, so it should in theory be flat with that wall, and I will check with a straight edge, and I'll be able to lay the bricks. And because it's level with the top of the bricks, when I lay the bricks, all I need to do is make sure they're level with the top of this string, and they will therefore be flat, level and in line. So there we are. Now then, because I'm extending a straight wall, I want the bricks to key in, so I want some of the bricks to actually be into this existing bit of wall. So I'm going to chop out a little half brick shapes every so often so that I can put the bricks in. Now this is not necessarily a very easy thing to do. I'm not sure it's really going to work. I'm going to use as a grinder with a brick cutting disc on it, and I'm going to cut the mortar and the brick. So I'll start with this, actually I'll start with the bottom one in case I make a mess, it won't show. I'm going to cut the brick, cut the mortar, and then use a chisel to take out the remaining bit of mortar and hopefully take out the piece of brick. And obviously you never stand in the plane of the disc, so if it does burst it won't hit you, in theory. So I've gone as far as I can with the grinder now. I've chopped all around the brick. Now I'm going to use this chisel, which is really thin and good for taking out mortar. So I'll chop out as much of the mortar as I can, and then hopefully we'll be able to break the brick out of there. So again, some gloves and some eye protection, and we just start hammering at it. Right, so it's taken a while, but finally that brick's come out. Now I'll keep that in case I need a little stub end later on. And all I need to do is just to clean up this bit, and I thankfully haven't loosened any of the bricks around it. If I had, I'd take those out so I could remortar them as well. But that looks okay, so just a little bit more cleaning up and that'll be ready, and I'll have another go at this top one as well. So I've mixed up some mortar, I'm ready with I've taken the bricks out, I've got the string in place, I'm ready with the mortar. So this is just soft sand, cement and a bit of plasticizer. So the soft sand, I think I've got about 6 to 1. Now there are a bunch of different mixes you can use for bricklaying, and I'm sure there's going to be loads of comments that this isn't the right mix, but it works for me. So, and what you do, and I'm not claiming to be an expert, you get a bit of a sausage onto your trowel, you drop it where you need the brick. In fact, I don't think I've got enough there. There we are. Now this mix needs to be relatively soft. If you have it too stiff, then what happens is you can't push the brick down, and it doesn't work properly. So nice and soft, you can just tap it and the brick will sink into the soft stuff. So put the brick in place. So because it's an end, we need to put some mortar on the end, and I find the trick to that, if you go down the sides like that, then it won't fall off straight away when you try and put it in place. Let's see. Okay, so we put it up against the string, and then you go either the back of the trowel or the back, the wooden part of a lump hammer, and you can just tap it into place. And when you're putting these things in place, it's always easy to get them to lean in that direction. So if I put a little spirit level on, I can see I've done exactly that, and this one actually needs to go back quite a way, which usually affects how high you are on the front as well. So there's the first one done, matches up with the string, we can move on and do the rest. So that's the first bottom row in place. So don't worry about the pointing just now, the bits in between, because what we'll do once it starts to set, we'll just go around with a little bit of old plumbing pipe and just neaten those up. So I'm going to leave that now to set, and then I'm going to start on the bigger bricks for the next few rows, and it's really the same sort of thing. I'll film the first bit and then we'll see how we get on. So starting on the second row, it's important to have your mortar quite soft for this, because if you need to bash them to get them into place, what will happen is it'll loosen the bricks on the next row. So this case I've had to cut one to make it slightly shorter so that it fits. It's normal to do the corner first, get that level, and then you can put string across from the corner onto the bricks so that you can make the lines. Now in this case, because I've had to cut into the existing wall, I've done that bit first, and then the corner will actually fill up the whole bit of the wall. But once I've done that, I will then do the rest towards the other wall. So now I've done the corner, I've put the string line again using a bit of gaffer tape to exactly the right mark on the other wall where I need it to go. I've checked that it's level, and then all I need to do is put the bricks along there. Now I'm going to start here and go to there, because if I have to cut any bricks, I'd rather cut the one at the end so that it doesn't really show. So there are lots of ways to cut blocks. You can use a grinder. If your grinder's not big enough, you can always use a cold chisel and a hammer. And what you do, if I pan you down a little bit, you mark out where you want to actually do it, and you take your cold chisel and you keep turning it, and you go all the way around just with a couple of taps. Try and get it so that they all match up all the way around, which these keep going, and eventually the block will break. There we go, it's gone perfectly along that thing. I've got a nice flat cut, a little bit of patience, and you can cut the bricks. Now you can see I've done a couple of layers, 3 in fact. You don't want to go too many, otherwise the stuff at the bottom stops supporting the stuff at the top and the whole thing will sink. And all I've done as I've gone around, as the mortar squeezed out, obviously I just pick it up with this, so I've got a very rough looking thing. So this is the point where you can start to look at getting this right. So if you wait a little while until it started to dry, this is actually easier. And all I've done, this is a 15mm plumbing pipe, and I've just put a bend in the end, which means I can hold it like this and I can run it along and not make that pointing nice and neat. If I combine that with a little brush, I can brush off all the extra bits that shouldn't be there. And this is easier if you leave it a little bit longer. This isn't quite ready, but I'm doing it anyway. So you run along the pipe with the pipe, make the joints nice, brush them down, and you should end up with something that looks quite nice on the front. Now where it meets the wall on this side, it's very difficult to chop out a brick in the same way that I did there, because it's into a flat wall. So I've got one of these ties that I mentioned earlier, and all we do is it goes along there like that, I can't see it, and then I'll take a drill, I'll drill a hole in the wall here, bolt it in place so it's attached to the wall, and when I put the mortar in, this goes into the mortar, and more mortar goes on top, the brick goes on top, and it sandwiches in, and that will hold the wall certainly left to right like that. I've also put one at the next level down, but I forgot to film that, so we'll do this one now. So you can see I put some mortar down, screwed this to the wall, and then a bit more mortar on top of it, and then the brick can go on top of that. Now you can see the wall has had a few days to dry now, so with a bit of weathering you can see that's going to fit in with the existing stuff. It's nice and dry, so I can start adding some hardcore in. So you can see what I've been doing, taking all these bits of old rock and brick that I found in the garden and chuck those all in. Anything that's not going to compress. You don't want to be putting fresh soil, for instance, in there, because that will compress and your slabs will start to wobble after a while. So there we are. You can also put in some actual hardcore. You can buy this stuff if you don't have any of these old rocks and things. You can buy this hardcore. It's basically sort of rocks and things mixed in with sand. In fact, there's a slug there as well. Lovely. So, and then you can tip this in and then fill this up. So we're looking at essentially, as we fill it up, we're chucking in some of this stuff and some sharp sand as well to fill in the gap, so you're getting a really solid surface. So I'll do some more of that. And then once you've got the hardcore to pretty much near the top, I'm going to swap over to this, which is sharp sand. And what I'll do is put this on until it's sort of looking level, and then I'll stamp it down. You can get various tampers and things. I tend to use a hammer, I'll show you that in a minute, and then get that flat. And you can see as I'm working this sand, any holes will show up, and I can tip the sand right down the holes, down over there, and make sure that everywhere's full. That's what I want, is this to be really firm so that it doesn't move about. The last thing you want is the stuff underneath to move about. So first of all I'm walking on it, just making sure everything, all these holes, one there, look, all the holes that are there, I just scoot some sand down and keep going until you're nicely up to the level of the bricks. So we're getting there now, starting to come up to the level. Do not be tempted to do this before the wall is fully dry though, because what will happen is you'll push it over. So leave it a good 2 or 3 days to make sure that wall is solid before you start doing this. Now then, I've put some hardcore down and I've put some sand on top, and what I'm doing now, I've got this enormous hammer. Now I'm only using this because I haven't got a proper tamping tool. So what they would normally be, it's like a scaffolding pole with a weight on the end, and you sort of stand there and bang it like that. But I haven't got one of these, so I'm using this enormous hammer. And what you do is you sort of gently tap. You can see here, for instance, holes open up between, so I'm just tapping it, and all the holes between the rubble open up, and the dry sand then flows down into the gaps. And that's really helpful, because that means it gets all in there and it helps to sort of solidify it all, get all that sand in between the gaps. I'll just do this for a bit, and then I'll put some more damp sand on the top. I'll compact that down until I've got a nice flat smooth surface that I can put the slabs on top of. So I'm fairly happy with that sand now. What I'm going to do now is a bit of cement, and what you do is just add a little bit, so a couple of spadefuls. You don't need a huge amount, like that, and then with a rake just mix it in with that sand so that we get a nice sort of mixture. And then what will happen, as it absorbs the moisture from the sand, that will form like a crust on the top, so it'll get a nice hard, I think we'll be better off with a proper rake than this rake, but get the idea. And get a spade as well, and you can just turn that over and mix it in, and maybe a bit more sand, so we're just up to the level of the bricks, maybe slightly below, so we've got something upon which to put the slabs. Now there's a bunch of different ways you can put the slabs down. One I often see is where you use dry sand or damp sand and cement, and you make a nice flat layer, and then you put the slabs on top of that and bed them in. Now, I've tried that several times, and what happens is it doesn't ever work. It's never worked for me anyway. What happens is you try and bed them in, it's not quite flat, so you push it down, you end up with a wobbly slab, and then you have to get it back up again, put some more sand under, try again, and then it's too high. Just mess about for ages. So my preferred method, and the way this was done originally by a professional, was just to use wet sand and cement, so essentially a mortar mix, and not in dabs, because I've seen that go wrong as well, where you put 5 dabs, one in each corner and one in the middle. They always come loose. Been there, seen that. So what I'm going to do is put a proper square of mortar on there, the right height. I'm going to bed the slab down into that mortar, and then that can stay and set for a few days. So this time I'm added, it's going to be a 6-to-1 mix again, but a couple of the soft sand I'm going to exchange for a couple of sharp sand. And what that does is makes the mortar a little bit firmer, so that as you drop the slab in, it doesn't just go splat, because slabs are quite heavy. So the first thing to do is to chuck some mortar onto there. And then on top of that, I can drop the slab. So I've got my gloves on, because they can get a bit heavy and sharp. Now, immediately you can see the level is too low. That means I haven't put enough mortar on. So take it up again, put some more down. And then we'll give it another try. You notice I've left a bit of a pattern in it to give it somewhere to squash to. Make a dead smooth, flat one that fills everything up. Then when you drop the slab in, it'll have nowhere to squash to. And immediately we can see that's a much better fit. And to get the final fit, a little rubber hammer just to sort of tap it into place. And don't forget to leave a gap so that you can put some grouting in. I forgot the word. And then as you tap it in place, wheel it around till it's right. Now don't be tempted to use a metal hammer or this kind of thing where you bash it down with the, because what will happen is the slab will crack. If it's too high and it's not going down, you need to fetch it up, take some of the mortar out. It's just an iterative thing, otherwise you'll risk breaking it. So here we go. And the final thing is to check it with a straight edge against both sides to make sure you've got it right. And don't forget, from the house outwards there needs to be a very slight, just off the bubble run, so to stop the water from accumulating. Now that both slabs are in place, the final job is to go around with the trowel and just clean up anything that's coming out underneath, just to make it a neat job. And also, if anything's squashed up between the gaps, you need to take that out now before it sets, so that you can get some grout in later. Now, you shouldn't be getting any mortar on top of the slabs while you're doing this. It makes a mess. So if you have made a bit of a cock up, and no one's perfect, a wet sponge while it's wet, and you can just clean off that mortar. Otherwise it will be there forever. There we go. Now it's been a few days and this has had a good time to set now, so these are nice and firm. I'm going to do the grouting. I'm going to use this stuff, if I can hold it up the right way around. It's this stuff called Pro Joint Rapid Flow. It's essentially sort of a resin based thing. It's a bit like sand. You brush it in and then it sets really hard. This has been done with it already. Now you can use a mixture of sand and cement as well. The trick there is to brush it in dry, otherwise it sticks to everything and makes a real mess, and then sprinkle it with water. I have had varying amounts of success with that in the past, but this stuff is really good. I've used it before, and I wouldn't go back now. The only problem is, of course, is that it comes in fairly large pots, but thankfully it comes in 2 half ones, and I've actually got another set of paving that I need to grout anyway, so I'll open this one up and we'll get going with that. Now the problem I've discovered grouting, when you've got an edge like this that's got a lip, what happens is that the stuff flows down the gap and falls out, and you end up with this horrible edge, and what you want really is a nice square edge there. So what I've done, you can see what I've done here, I've taken a piece of wood and I've made a little L shape with it, really, you can see there, so that's underneath right against the bricks, and then this is, so I can brush the stuff in here now and this will catch it and I'll get a nice edge. And you can see all I've done is just wedged it with a piece of wood so that's in the right place. I shall do that there, and I've got another one that I'll put there, and that'll make a much neater job. So following in the instructions, the first thing to do is to get it wet. Now this is kind of opposite to what you'd want to do if you were using just dry sanded cement. So you get it wet, and we get this and we tip some on. And once we've done that, we take a brush and we can just brush it in to all the gaps like that. And once we've done that, we can water it again, and this will make sure it kind of sinks in to any of the gaps and things, any of the little air pockets and air holes. Okay, and then we can brush it again. Now the final thing I'm going to do before I call it a day is to take me a bit of pipe that I use for the pointing, and I can just run that along the gaps to give me a nice smooth finish. And so here we are, here's the final result. Looking alright, I can walk on it, here we go. It's all fairly solid, so that seems to have worked. Now obviously it's a different colour, it's going to take a year or so for it all to dumb down, and hopefully I've chosen the right colour of grout as well, that sort of darkens down and matches. Yeah, give it a year and it should be good to go. So there we are. So I hope that was helpful. If you liked it, please feel free to subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next time.